The blue flash of police lights shattered the quiet stillness of an upscale Chicago suburb just after midnight. Rain from an earlier storm still glistened on the pavement, turning the streets into ribbons of reflected color. Officer Tyler Grant sat behind the wheel of his patrol cruiser, watching the neighborhood with restless eyes. Wealth lived here behind iron gates and stone walls. To him, it felt like a place where he did not belong. Tyler had spent most of his career patrolling rougher districts. He preferred noise, confrontation, and the rush that came from being the one in control. 3 months earlier, a complaint involving excessive force had nearly cost him his position. The department transferred him to North Ridge Estates to keep him out of trouble. Instead of learning a lesson, he carried his resentment with him. As he sipped cold coffee, a black Mercedes-Benz rolled smoothly through the intersection ahead. The luxury sedan moved at the exact speed limit. Nothing about it appeared suspicious, yet Tyler immediately focused on the driver. Through the windshield, he saw a well-dressed African-American man traveling alone. A familiar voice whispered inside Tyler's mind. It was the voice of prejudice disguised as instinct. The expensive car, the wealthy neighborhood, the successful black driver. Tyler convinced himself that something was wrong, even though he had no evidence. He pulled out behind the vehicle and followed it for several blocks. The driver remained calm and steady. No traffic violations, no sudden movements, no reason for a stop. Still, Tyler activated his lights. Inside the Mercedes, Judge Nathaniel Brooks released a tired breath. At 56 years old, he had spent the entire week presiding over a major federal corruption trial in downtown Chicago. The proceedings had stretched late into every evening. He wanted nothing more than to return home to his wife, Denise, and enjoy a quiet night. Nathaniel checked his speedometer. He was obeying every traffic law. Nevertheless, he signaled, pulled to the curb, and lowered his windows. Experience had taught him that cooperation often reduced unnecessary tension during encounters with law enforcement. Tyler approached the vehicle with exaggerated confidence. His flashlight beam struck directly into Nathaniel's eyes. "License and registration," Tyler demanded. Nathaniel kept both hands visible on the steering wheel. "Good evening, officer. May I ask why I was stopped?" "I'll ask the questions," Tyler replied sharply. Nathaniel slowly retrieved the requested documents. Years in the courtroom had trained him to observe people carefully. He immediately noticed the officer's impatience, the aggressive posture, and the desire to dominate the interaction. The atmosphere felt wrong. Tyler leaned closer and pretended to inspect the interior. "I smell marijuana," he said. The statement caught Nathaniel by surprise. There was no marijuana in the vehicle. There never had been. "Officer, there are no drugs in this car," Nathaniel answered calmly. "Step out of the vehicle. Now." Nathaniel complied without argument. He knew the law. More importantly, he understood how dangerous roadside confrontations could become. Winning an argument on the street was rarely worth the risk. Cold wind swept through the neighborhood as he stood beside the Mercedes. Tyler conducted a rough search and found nothing illegal. Instead of backing away, the officer appeared frustrated. That reaction concerned Nathaniel more than anything else. Tyler ordered him to stand near the rear bumper while he searched the car. Nathaniel watched carefully. The officer positioned his body in an unusual way, shielding his movements from obvious view. For a brief second, Tyler reached toward his tactical vest. Nathaniel's stomach tightened. The gesture lasted only a moment, but something about it felt deliberate. Minutes later, Tyler emerged holding a small plastic bag filled with white powder. "Looks like we found something," he announced. Nathaniel stared at the bag. His pulse remained steady, yet a cold wave of anger moved through him. He had never seen the package before. "That isn't mine," he said. Tyler smiled as handcuffs clicked around Nathaniel's wrists. "Tell it to the judge." Nathaniel slowly lifted his eyes and looked directly at the officer. The expression on his face was not fear. It was certainty. "I intend to," he replied. As the patrol car carried him toward the station, Tyler believed he had trapped another suspect. What he did not know was that Nathaniel Brooks was not merely a respected federal judge. Hidden inside the Mercedes was a security system that had recorded every second of the encounter. And somewhere within that footage lay the beginning of Tyler Grant's downfall. By sunrise, the arrest had already begun spreading through Chicago's legal community. Rumors moved faster than facts. A federal judge had been arrested for cocaine possession during a routine traffic stop. Reporters started making calls before most people finished their morning coffee. Judge Nathaniel Brooks spent the night alone inside a holding cell. The concrete walls were cold. The fluorescent lights never fully dimmed. Yet he remained remarkably calm. Years on the federal bench had taught him that panic rarely improved any situation. He sat quietly on a narrow metal bench, replaying every second of the traffic stop. The officer's movements, the body position near the driver's door, the strange reach toward the tactical vest. Nathaniel trusted his memory. More importantly, he trusted evidence. Across the building, Police Chief Richard Donovan stared at the arrest report with growing horror. He had been awakened before dawn by a call from the station commander. The moment he saw the suspect's name, his stomach dropped. Judge Nathaniel Brooks was one of the most respected federal judges in Illinois. He had spent decades building a reputation for fairness, integrity, and independence. He was known throughout Chicago's legal circles for refusing political pressure from either side. Now his name sat at the top of a drug arrest report. Chief Donovan immediately knew the situation could become catastrophic, especially because the arresting officer was Tyler Grant. Tyler's disciplinary file was already thicker than most officers accumulated in an entire career. Excessive force complaints, questionable searches, aggressive conduct. None of the accusations had been proven, but the pattern worried supervisors. Now Tyler was at the center of a scandal involving a federal judge. Meanwhile, Nathaniel finally received permission to make a phone call. He dialed a number from memory. The call connected after a single ring. "Nathaniel," a voice answered. "Good morning, Victoria." There was a brief silence. "Why are you calling from county jail?" Nathaniel almost smiled. Victoria Sinclair was not only one of Chicago's most feared defense attorneys, she had also been his closest friend since law school. "I've had an interesting evening," Nathaniel replied. 20 minutes later, Victoria arrived at the station. She moved through the building like a storm system. Her sharp grey suit and confident stride immediately commanded attention. Officers stepped aside without being asked. Inside a private interview room, she sat across from Nathaniel. "Tell me everything." Nathaniel described the stop in precise detail. Victoria listened carefully without interrupting. When he finished, she leaned back. "Do you think he planted it?" "I know he did." "Can you prove it?" Nathaniel's expression remained steady. "Possibly." Victoria raised an eyebrow. Nathaniel explained the advanced security system installed inside his Mercedes. The vehicle continuously recorded activity whenever it detected unusual movement around the car. Victoria's eyes widened. "You think it captured everything?" "I believe it did." For the first time that morning, genuine excitement appeared on her face. "Then we don't have a defense case," she said. "No. We have a prosecution case." At the same moment, Tyler sat in a conference room completing paperwork. His confidence had begun returning. The arrest report was finished. The evidence had been logged. The story was official. In his experience, official reports carried enormous weight. Most citizens never recovered once a police narrative entered the system. He convinced himself the judge would eventually accept a quiet settlement. Perhaps the department would discipline him lightly. Perhaps nothing serious would happen at all. Tyler failed to notice that several officers had stopped speaking when he entered rooms. They had seen enough scandals to recognize danger, and this one felt different. Shortly before noon, 2 black SUVs pulled into the station parking lot. Several men and women stepped out. Dark suits, federal credentials, professional expressions, the FBI had arrived. Tyler watched through a window as they entered the building. For the first time since the arrest, uncertainty touched his thoughts. He reminded himself that the drugs had been found inside the vehicle. Physical evidence mattered. The case seemed simple, yet deep inside, a small voice warned him that something had gone terribly wrong. An hour later, Victoria Sinclair walked into FBI headquarters carrying a secure flash drive. Stored inside was footage recently retrieved from Nathaniel's Mercedes. She placed it on the conference table. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said calmly, looking at the agents gathered around her. "I believe you're about to witness the end of Officer Tyler Grant's career." None of them knew that the video contained something even worse than misconduct. It contained a crime recorded from 3 different angles in crystal clear detail. The conference room inside FBI headquarters remained silent as the video began playing. Senior agents, prosecutors, and internal investigators watched the large screen with intense focus. The footage came from multiple cameras installed throughout Nathaniel Brooks's Mercedes. Every angle was clear, every movement was visible, every second was time-stamped. Victoria Sinclair folded her arms and stood near the back wall. She already knew what the recording contained. The agents did not. The video showed Nathaniel exiting the vehicle exactly as he described. It showed him standing near the rear bumper with his hands visible. Then Officer Tyler Grant approached the driver's side. The room remained quiet. Tyler glanced around. His body partially blocked the exterior camera. For a moment, nothing seemed unusual. Then the interior camera captured everything. His right hand reached into his tactical vest. A small plastic bag appeared. The officer carefully placed it beside the center console. Several agents exchanged looks. Nobody spoke. The footage continued. Tyler stepped back, pretended to search the area, and dramatically recovered the evidence he had planted seconds earlier. The entire sequence lasted less than 20 seconds. 20 seconds that destroyed a career. When the video ended, the room remained silent. Finally, Special Agent Marcus Kane exhaled. "Well," he said quietly, "that may be the dumbest thing I've seen all year." Nobody disagreed. Within an hour, a federal investigation officially opened. The focus shifted immediately. Judge Brooks was no longer considered a suspect. Officer Tyler Grant had become the target. Back at the police station, Tyler sat alone in a small interview room. Chief Donovan entered carrying a thick folder. He closed the door behind him. For several seconds, neither man spoke. The chief looked exhausted. Tyler looked irritated. "What's going on?" Tyler asked. "The FBI has taken over the investigation." "Good, they'll clear everything up." The chief stared at him. "Do you have any idea how serious this is?" "I arrested a guy with drugs." "You arrested a federal judge." Tyler shrugged. "Nobody is above the law." The chief slowly placed the folder on the table. Inside were printed screenshots from the Mercedes footage. Tyler looked down. His confidence vanished instantly. The first image showed his hand entering the tactical vest. The second showed the plastic bag. The third showed the moment he planted it. The fourth captured his face perfectly. Color drained from his skin. "Where did you get these?" "The judge's vehicle." Tyler swallowed hard. His mouth suddenly felt dry. "This doesn't prove anything." The chief almost laughed. "It proves everything." For the first time, Tyler realized the situation could not be controlled. The report he filed, the evidence log, the arrest affidavit, every document now became proof of additional crimes. Each lie created another charge. Chief Donovan removed Tyler's badge and service weapon. The action felt ceremonial, like a funeral. "You're suspended immediately," the chief said. "You can't do this." "I already did." Tyler stood abruptly. Anger replaced fear. "You're throwing me under the bus." "No, Tyler." The chief's voice hardened. "You walked there yourself." Meanwhile, news of the investigation remained confidential. Victoria Sinclair insisted on patience. Nathaniel agreed. The truth would eventually become public, but timing mattered. A rushed victory could leave loopholes. A careful strategy could ensure accountability. That evening, Nathaniel returned home for the first time since the arrest. His wife Denise met him at the front door. Neither spoke immediately. She simply wrapped her arms around him. For a moment, the judge allowed himself to feel the emotional weight of the past 24 hours. The humiliation, the anger, the fear. Not fear for himself. Fear for every person who lacked resources, influence, and evidence. People who faced officers like Tyler every day. At dinner, Denise listened quietly as Nathaniel described the footage. When he finished, she shook her head. "He almost destroyed your life." Nathaniel stared into his coffee. "No." "What do you mean?" "He almost destroyed the idea that the law applies equally to everyone." The distinction mattered. Nathaniel understood that his reputation would survive. Many others would not have been so fortunate. Late that night, Victoria called. Her tone was unusually serious. "Nathaniel, there's something else." "What is it?" "The FBI reviewed Tyler's previous arrests." A long pause followed. "And?" Several cases look suspicious. Nathaniel sat upright. How many? We don't know yet. Maybe dozens. The judge slowly looked out the window toward the lights of Chicago. The city stretched endlessly beneath the dark sky. What began as a single traffic stop was becoming something much larger. Tyler Grant had not merely framed one innocent man. The evidence suggested he may have built an entire career on lies. And somewhere inside old case files, forgotten defendants were about to receive a second chance. Within a week, the investigation exploded beyond anyone's expectations. What had started as a single misconduct complaint became one of the largest police corruption probes in Illinois in over a decade. Federal investigators worked around the clock. Old arrest reports were reopened. Evidence lockers were audited. Body camera footage was reviewed frame by frame. Former defendants were contacted. The deeper investigators dug, the darker the picture became. Tyler Grant sat alone inside his suburban townhouse, watching news coverage consume his life. Every major Chicago station carried updates. Former officer Tyler Grant. The words appeared beneath his photograph repeatedly. His neighbors stopped making eye contact. His phone rarely rang anymore. The few friends who remained advised him to stay quiet. His attorney advised the same. For the first time in years, Tyler felt powerless. Across the city, Judge Nathaniel Brooks continued working despite the controversy surrounding his name. He returned to federal court. He resumed hearings. He maintained his schedule. Yet something inside him had changed. The experience forced him to confront a difficult truth. He had survived because he possessed resources unavailable to most Americans: money, education, connections, technology. Without those advantages, he might have been sitting in a prison cell awaiting trial. That realization haunted him. One rainy afternoon, Victoria Sinclair arrived at Nathaniel's chambers carrying several thick binders. "You need to see this," she said. Nathaniel opened the first folder. Inside were transcripts from previous arrests involving Tyler Grant. The patterns appeared immediately. Contradictory statements, questionable searches, missing evidence, charges dismissed without explanation, witnesses who suddenly changed stories. The second binder was worse. 3 young men from Chicago's South Side had accepted plea deals years earlier after Tyler claimed he discovered narcotics during traffic stops. All 3 maintained their innocence. All 3 lacked resources for effective legal defense. All 3 now appeared potentially innocent. Nathaniel closed the binder slowly. "How many?" Victoria sighed. "The FBI estimates at least 20 questionable arrests. 20 lives, maybe more." Nathaniel walked toward the window overlooking downtown Chicago. Gray clouds hung low above the skyline. Rain streaked across the glass. The city looked tired. So did he. "What happens now?" he asked. "Federal prosecutors are building criminal charges. Against Tyler? Against Tyler, possibly others, and maybe the department itself." That possibility changed everything, because proving misconduct by one officer was difficult. Proving that supervisors ignored warning signs could become devastating. Meanwhile, Chief Donovan faced growing pressure. City officials demanded answers. Community leaders demanded accountability. Journalists demanded records. The mayor demanded reassurance. Nobody received what they wanted. Every day seemed to reveal another failure. Then came the first public breakthrough. Federal investigators announced that one of Tyler's previous convictions would be formally reviewed. The defendant was a 23-year-old mechanic named Marcus Hill. Marcus had spent 4 years in prison for cocaine possession. The arresting officer had been Tyler Grant. Within days, investigators discovered inconsistencies between Tyler's report and archived video evidence. The conviction was immediately challenged. Marcus walked out of prison 2 weeks later. Television cameras captured the emotional reunion. His mother cried, his younger sister cried. Marcus simply stood silently beneath the afternoon sun. He had missed birthdays, funerals, relationships, years, all because one officer decided the truth was optional. The footage spread nationwide. Public opinion shifted rapidly. The story was no longer about a judge. It was about every person harmed by abuse of authority. Tyler watched Marcus's release from his living room. The images unsettled him. He tried convincing himself that prosecutors exaggerated everything. He tried blaming the media. He blamed politicians. He blamed the department. He blamed Nathaniel. But late at night, when the house became quiet, another thought surfaced. What if they find all of them? The question refused to disappear. 2 days later, federal prosecutors announced formal charges: civil rights violations, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, perjury, official misconduct. The potential sentence exceeded 20 years. Reporters surrounded the courthouse. Television helicopters circled overhead. Nathaniel watched from his chambers as Tyler entered federal court for arraignment. Gone was the confidence, gone was the swagger, gone was the certainty. For the first time, Tyler looked exactly like what he had made countless others feel: afraid. Yet another surprise awaited investigators. During a routine audit of Tyler's financial records, federal agents discovered a series of unexplained cash deposits stretching back nearly 5 years. The amounts were small individually. Together, they totaled hundreds of thousands of dollars. Suddenly, investigators were no longer examining a corrupt officer. They were looking at the possibility of a criminal enterprise, and Tyler Grant was beginning to look less like a lone actor and more like the first domino in a much larger collapse. The federal courthouse in downtown Chicago had witnessed countless scandals over the decades: political corruption, organized crime, corporate fraud. Yet the case against former officer Tyler Grant generated a level of attention few expected. Every hearing attracted reporters, every filing made headlines, every revelation deepened public outrage. The evidence continued piling up. What investigators initially believed was a single act of misconduct now appeared connected to years of abuse. Federal prosecutors uncovered bank records showing unexplained deposits, internal affairs complaints that had quietly disappeared, witness statements that contradicted official police reports. Most disturbing of all, they found individuals whose lives had been permanently altered by Tyler's actions. One of those people was Marcus Hill. After his release from prison, Marcus agreed to testify before a federal grand jury. He described the night of his arrest in painful detail: the stop, the search, the sudden appearance of narcotics, the impossible choice between risking trial or accepting a plea deal. Marcus had chosen survival. 4 years later, investigators confirmed he had likely been innocent. His testimony opened floodgates. Within days, more former defendants stepped forward: a college student from Chicago's West Side, a delivery driver from Aurora, a mechanic from Joliet, a construction worker from South Chicago. Different backgrounds, different neighborhoods, the same officer, the same story, the same fear, the same outcome. Meanwhile, Tyler's personal life collapsed around him. His wife, Lauren, spent weeks avoiding reporters, parked outside their home. Their 2 daughters heard classmates discussing the scandal. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors whispered. The isolation became unbearable. One evening, Lauren sat across from Tyler at the kitchen table. Neither had touched dinner. The food sat untouched between them. "Tell me the truth," she finally said. Tyler looked away. "I already have." "No," her voice cracked. "Tell me the actual truth." For several seconds, silence filled the room. Rain tapped softly against the windows. A clock ticked somewhere in the house. Tyler stared at the table. For the first time, he realized he could no longer separate his lies from reality. He had repeated them so often that they felt natural, comfortable, necessary. But Lauren's eyes demanded honesty. He could not provide it. She stood slowly. "That's what I thought." The following morning, she met with a divorce attorney. Across the city, Nathaniel Brooks faced a very different struggle. Publicly, he had become a symbol of accountability. Privately, he wrestled with anger, not because of what happened to him, because of what happened to others. Every new case file felt like another failure of the system he dedicated his life to serving. One afternoon, Nathaniel visited a community center on Chicago's South Side. Several exonerees gathered there for support meetings. Marcus Hill attended. So did others affected by wrongful arrests. Nathaniel listened as they shared stories: lost jobs, broken marriages, children growing up without parents, years stolen forever. The emotional cost exceeded any financial settlement. As the meeting ended, Marcus approached him. Judge Brooks? Yes? Marcus hesitated. I wanted to thank you. Nathaniel shook his head. You don't owe me thanks. Maybe not, but if Tyler never stopped your car, nobody would have looked into mine. The statement stayed with Nathaniel long after the meeting ended. That night he sat alone in his study. The city lights shimmered beyond the window. He thought about justice, not the abstract legal concept discussed in courtrooms. Real justice, the kind that changed lives, the kind that protected people before harm occurred, the kind that prevented future abuse. An idea began forming, small at first, then larger. By midnight, he had filled several pages with notes. The next morning, he invited Victoria Sinclair to breakfast. She arrived carrying legal documents. Nathaniel arrived carrying a notebook. I have a proposal, he said. Victoria smiled. That usually means trouble. Maybe. He slid the notebook across the table. She read silently. Her expression changed, then changed again. Finally, she looked up. You're serious? Completely. The proposal outlined a legal defense foundation funded by any future settlement resulting from the case. Investigators, defense attorneys, civil rights litigation, community education, wrongful conviction review. The plan was ambitious, expensive, potentially transformative. Victoria leaned back. If this works, it could change everything. Nathaniel nodded. That's the point. At that exact moment, federal investigators made another discovery. A recently retired lieutenant agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. He claimed supervisors had received repeated warnings about Tyler Grant for years. And according to his statement, several people inside the department had helped bury complaints. The investigation was no longer aimed at one former officer. It was moving towards City Hall, police leadership, and everyone who chose silence when they should have spoken. The announcement struck City Hall like a lightning bolt. A retired police lieutenant had agreed to cooperate with federal investigators. His testimony threatened to expose years of negligence, favoritism, and deliberate inaction inside the Chicago Police Department. For city leaders, the danger was no longer Tyler Grant. The danger was what Tyler might reveal about everyone else. Federal prosecutors moved quickly. Grand jury subpoenas were issued. Internal emails were collected. Personnel files disappeared into evidence boxes. Investigators interviewed supervisors who once dismissed complaints against Tyler as misunderstandings. Suddenly, those decisions required explanations. Many explanations were difficult to provide. Chief Richard Donovan found himself spending more time with attorneys than police officers. Every morning brought another request for records. Every afternoon brought another damaging headline. Every evening brought another phone call from the mayor. The pressure became relentless. One afternoon, Donovan sat alone in his office, staring at a photograph taken years earlier. It showed a younger version of himself graduating from the police academy. Back then, he believed integrity was simple. Do the right thing, tell the truth, protect the public. Somewhere along the way, those principles became complicated. Or perhaps he simply allowed them to become complicated. A knock interrupted his thoughts. The city attorney entered, carrying a folder. The federal government wants another interview. Donovan closed his eyes. About Tyler? About everyone. Across Chicago, Tyler Grant faced a different reality. His legal team struggled to contain the damage. Every witness seemed stronger than the last. Every new piece of evidence reinforced the prosecution's case. And now former supervisors were beginning to cooperate. The walls were closing in. Tyler spent most days inside a federal detention facility awaiting trial. The confidence that once defined him had disappeared. His reflection looked unfamiliar, older, tired, afraid. One evening, his attorney arrived carrying difficult news. The government offered a plea agreement. Tyler immediately sat upright. How much time? The attorney hesitated. 15 years. Tyler laughed bitterly. 15 years isn't an offer. It's better than what happens if we lose. Silence followed. Because both men understood the truth. The trial was becoming unwinnable. Tyler stared at the concrete floor. What if I cooperate? His attorney studied him carefully. Do you have something valuable to give them? Tyler didn't answer, but the question lingered. Meanwhile, Judge Nathaniel Brooks continued developing plans for his future legal foundation. The project consumed much of his free time. Victoria Sinclair joined him regularly. Together they met with attorneys, civil rights advocates, retired investigators, and community leaders. The goal was ambitious: create an organization capable of defending ordinary citizens against abuses of power, not merely reacting to injustice, preventing it. The more people they consulted, the more support they received. Former prosecutors volunteered, retired judges offered advice, private donors expressed interest. Momentum grew rapidly. One evening, Nathaniel attended a community forum in Chicago's Bronzeville neighborhood. Residents gathered inside a historic church. Many came seeking answers. Others came seeking hope. Near the end of the event, an elderly woman approached the microphone. Her voice trembled. "Judge Brooks, my grandson spent 3 years in prison for something he didn't do." The room became silent. When he came home, nobody apologized. Nobody cared. Nobody helped him rebuild his life. She paused. Tears filled her eyes. "Will your foundation help people like him?" Nathaniel looked around the room. Faces watched him from every direction. People carried stories, losses, disappointments, scars, the kind that statistics never capture. "Yes," he answered quietly. "That's exactly who we're building it for." The room erupted into applause, not because of politics, not because of ideology, because people recognized sincerity when they heard it. As support for the project grew, negotiations regarding the civil lawsuit accelerated. City officials wanted resolution. The scandal had already cost millions. More importantly, public trust continued eroding. The city proposed settlement discussions. Nathaniel agreed, Victoria agreed, but neither intended to settle cheaply. The evidence was overwhelming, the damages were enormous, and accountability carried a price. Late one night, after another long strategy meeting, Victoria received a call from a federal prosecutor. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. When it ended, she immediately called Nathaniel. "We have a problem," she said. Nathaniel frowned. "What happened?" "Tyler Grant wants to cooperate." Nathaniel remained silent. "Against who?" Victoria took a deep breath. "According to prosecutors, half the department is suddenly very nervous. Because Tyler had finally decided that if his career was ending, he wasn't going down alone." The news spread through law enforcement circles before sunrise. Tyler Grant had agreed to cooperate. For years, officers who feared exposure believed he would never talk. Tyler built his reputation on loyalty to fellow officers and contempt for outside oversight. Now that loyalty had vanished, faced with decades in federal prison, he finally chose self-preservation. Federal prosecutors immediately scheduled multiple interviews. What Tyler revealed shocked even experienced investigators. The corruption was not organized in the traditional sense. There was no criminal mastermind, no secret hierarchy, no elaborate conspiracy. Instead, there was something arguably worse. A culture. Officers ignored warning signs. Supervisors avoided difficult conversations. Complaints disappeared into filing cabinets. Problem officers were transferred instead of disciplined. Everyone convinced themselves someone else would eventually fix the situation. Nobody did. Tyler described occasions when fellow officers privately questioned his arrests but never filed reports. He identified supervisors who quietly discouraged investigations. He revealed conversations where statistics mattered more than truth. Arrest numbers, drug seizures, performance evaluations. The system rewarded results. Too few people questioned how those results were achieved. Within weeks, federal agents executed multiple search warrants. Several officers were placed on administrative leave. 2 supervisors resigned. Another retired unexpectedly. The scandal expanded beyond anything city officials originally imagined. Mayor Daniel Whitaker faced growing public pressure. Poll numbers collapsed. Editorial boards demanded accountability. Community organizations organized demonstrations. Every public appearance turned into a confrontation. The city needed a resolution, fast. Meanwhile, civil settlement negotiations entered their final phase. Nathaniel Brooks sat across from city attorneys inside a conference room overlooking downtown Chicago. The atmosphere felt tense. Nobody smiled. Nobody wasted time with small talk. The numbers being discussed would impact city finances for years. Victoria Sinclair led most of the conversation. She presented evidence methodically. The wrongful arrest, the public humiliation, the reputational damage, the department's failure to address previous complaints, the resulting civil rights violations. Every argument strengthened the foundation of their case. By the end of the third day, city officials understood a jury would likely punish them severely. The settlement offer increased dramatically, then increased again. Finally, after exhausting negotiations, both sides reached an agreement. $28 million. The amount stunned reporters when details later became public. It became one of the largest settlements of its kind in Illinois history. News coverage dominated national headlines. Political commentators debated accountability. Legal analysts examined the implications. Community leaders celebrated what many viewed as a landmark victory. Nathaniel viewed it differently. The money brought him little satisfaction, because money could not restore lost years. Money could not erase trauma. Money could not repair broken trust. One evening, he sat alone in his study reviewing documents related to the future foundation. The settlement agreement rested nearby. $28 million. Enough money to transform lives. Enough money to create something lasting. Denise entered carrying 2 cups of tea. She placed one beside him. "You haven't looked happy once since this ended," she observed. Nathaniel smiled faintly. "Because it isn't really over. The lawsuit is settled." The lawsuit, yes. He looked toward the city skyline. Lights glittered against the night. Thousands of lives unfolding simultaneously. The larger problem remains. Denise sat beside him. "Then fix what you can." The simplicity of her advice struck him. Fix what you can, not everything, not the entire system, just the part within reach. The following morning, Nathaniel finalized plans for the foundation. The project would be larger than originally imagined. Much larger: free legal defense, wrongful conviction review, civil rights litigation, community education programs, scholarships, technology support, independent investigations. Every dollar would serve a purpose. Every dollar would challenge injustice. Weeks later, invitations arrived for a formal public announcement. Journalists anticipated a major speech. Donors planned attendance. Civil rights organizations requested seats. Interest exceeded capacity. Something significant was coming. Only a small group knew one final detail. Nathaniel intended to make a statement nobody would ever forget. A statement aimed directly at Tyler Grant. Not out of revenge, not out of anger, but because symbols matter. Stories matter. And sometimes the most powerful form of justice is ensuring a mistake becomes a permanent lesson. As preparations continued, Tyler sat inside a federal detention center reviewing legal documents. His cooperation agreement sat open before him. For the first time, he learned about the settlement. $28 million. He stared at the number repeatedly. Then he learned something else. Judge Brooks was creating a foundation using the money. Tyler laughed bitterly. At least he thought the judge would put his own name on the building. He had no idea that Nathaniel Brooks had chosen a very different name, and that decision would haunt Tyler far longer than any prison sentence ever could. The ballroom of Chicago's historic Lakeshore Grand Hotel overflowed with guests. Attorneys, judges, journalists, civil rights leaders, business executives, and community organizers filled every seat. Television cameras lined the back walls. Everyone wanted to witness the unveiling of Judge Nathaniel Brooks's new foundation. Rumors had circulated for weeks. Some believed he would enter politics. Others expected a national civil rights organization. A few speculated he planned to create a legal scholarship fund. Nobody knew the full truth. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. As the lights dimmed, conversations faded into silence. Nathaniel stepped onto the stage. The audience rose immediately. The applause lasted nearly a minute. When it finally settled, he approached the podium. He stood quietly for several seconds. The room became completely still. "1 year ago," he began, "I was placed in handcuffs on the side of a road despite committing no crime." The audience listened carefully. "I was fortunate. I had resources, I had legal knowledge, I had evidence. Most Americans do not." A large screen illuminated behind him. Photographs appeared. Marcus Hill, the delivery driver from Aurora, the college student from Chicago's West Side, men and women whose lives had been damaged by wrongful arrests. The room grew solemn. Justice should not depend upon income, influence, education, or luck, Nathaniel continued. Yet for many people, it does. The images changed. Families, courtrooms, community meetings, exonerations, people rebuilding lives once thought permanently broken. Today, Nathaniel said, we begin correcting that imbalance. The audience erupted into applause. He raised a hand. The room quieted again. The $28 million settlement paid by the city of Chicago will fund a permanent legal defense organization dedicated to protecting civil rights, reviewing questionable convictions, and defending citizens against abuses of power. More applause followed, this time louder, longer. Yet Nathaniel wasn't finished. There is one final announcement. Curiosity spread across the ballroom. Reporters leaned forward. Camera operators adjusted lenses. Nathaniel looked toward the giant screen. Names matter, he said. Names tell stories. They remind future generations where important lessons originated. The screen went black. A single spotlight illuminated the stage. For a brief moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Then large silver letters appeared. The Tyler Grant Justice Center. Absolute silence followed. Several people blinked. Others looked around in confusion. A few thought they had misread the display. Then realization spread through the audience. Shock transformed into disbelief. Disbelief transformed into stunned laughter. Nathaniel waited. The reaction grew stronger. Yes, he said calmly, the foundation will bear the name of the man whose actions made its existence necessary. The room erupted. Some guests laughed, others applauded. Many simply stared in amazement. Nathaniel's expression remained serious. Every innocent person defended by this organization will walk through doors carrying Tyler Grant's name. Every wrongful conviction overturned will be associated with Tyler Grant's name. Every abuse of power challenged by our attorneys will remind people why this foundation exists. The applause became thunderous. People stood, reporters rushed toward exits to file breaking stories. Social media exploded within minutes. National news networks interrupted programming. The announcement spread across the country. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Tyler Grant sat inside a federal detention center watching television. At first, he thought the headline was fake. Then footage from the gala appeared. Then Nathaniel's speech played. Then the giant sign appeared. The Tyler Grant Justice Center. Tyler's face drained of color. No, he whispered. The television continued. Analysts praised the symbolism. Commentators discussed accountability. Civil rights advocates celebrated the decision. Tyler switched channels. The story appeared again, and again, and again. His name had become something he never intended. A symbol, not of power, not of authority, not of law enforcement. A symbol of everything he represented and everything society hoped to overcome. For the first time since his arrest, Tyler understood the true scope of his defeat. Prison would eventually end, his sentence would someday expire, but this would survive him. Long after he was gone, people would continue speaking his name, not with fear, not with respect, but as a reminder of what happens when power forgets its purpose. And as applause echoed through the grand ballroom in Chicago, Tyler realized that his greatest punishment had only just begun. 3 years after the gala, the Tyler Grant Justice Center stood at the heart of downtown Chicago. Its glass exterior reflected the skyline during the day and glowed like a beacon at night. What began as a response to one wrongful arrest had grown into one of the most influential civil rights organizations in the Midwest. The center employed dozens of attorneys, investigators, forensic specialists, and legal researchers. Cases arrived from Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, and beyond. Every week brought new requests for help. Every month brought another victory. Wrongful convictions were overturned. Families were reunited. Police departments implemented reforms. Citizens learned their rights. The impact exceeded even Nathaniel Brooks's original vision. One autumn morning, a young attorney named Jasmine Carter stood before a courtroom in Chicago. She represented a 19-year-old college student accused of drug possession. The circumstances felt familiar. A questionable traffic stop, a disputed search, conflicting police statements. Years earlier, the student would likely have accepted a plea deal. Now he had resources. Investigators from the Tyler Grant Justice Center discovered surveillance footage that contradicted the arrest report. The charges were dismissed before trial. Outside the courthouse, the student's mother broke into tears. "Thank you," she told Jasmine. The attorney smiled. "Thank the people who built this place." Across town, another team from the center prepared a federal civil rights lawsuit involving misconduct allegations against a suburban police department. The organization had become exactly what Nathaniel intended: a shield, a watchdog, a warning. Meanwhile, Tyler Grant's world had shrunk to concrete walls and steel doors. Federal prison transformed every aspect of his life. The first year was difficult. The second year was worse. By the third year, most of the people he once knew had disappeared. Lauren finalized the divorce. His daughters stopped writing. Former colleagues avoided contact. Even his attorneys rarely called anymore. Tyler spent much of his time alone, thinking, remembering, regretting. One afternoon, a correctional officer delivered a stack of donated magazines to the prison library. Tyler absent-mindedly flipped through one while waiting for recreation time. Then he froze. The cover story featured the Tyler Grant Justice Center. Again, the accompanying article detailed the organization's achievements. More than 300 wrongful convictions reviewed. Millions recovered in civil settlements for victims of misconduct. Scholarships awarded. Community programs expanded. National recognition received. Tyler read every word. Each sentence felt heavier than the last. His name appeared repeatedly, not because of who he was, because of what he had become. A cautionary tale, a lesson, an example. For years he blamed Nathaniel Brooks for everything: the prosecution, the humiliation, the prison sentence. But sitting alone in the prison library, Tyler experienced something unexpected. Clarity. No judge forced him to plant evidence. No politician forced him to lie. No supervisor forced him to abuse power. Those decisions belonged entirely to him. The realization hurt because it was true. That evening, Tyler returned to his cell carrying the magazine. For a long time, he stared at the photograph on the cover. The center's entrance gleamed beneath bright afternoon sunlight. Above the doors stood his name: permanent, unavoidable, immortal. Thousands of people would pass beneath those letters in coming decades. Most would never know his face. Many would never hear the full story. Yet his choices would continue shaping lives long after he disappeared. Elsewhere, Nathaniel Brooks prepared for retirement. After decades of service, he planned to leave the federal bench at the end of the year. Colleagues organized celebrations. Former law clerks sent letters. Public officials praised his career. Yet what gave him the greatest satisfaction wasn't any judicial opinion or professional honor. It was the foundation, the people it helped, the futures it protected. One evening, while reviewing annual reports from the center, Nathaniel discovered a statistic that made him pause. Since opening, the organization had directly assisted more than 10,000 individuals. 10,000. The number seemed almost impossible. He leaned back in his chair and smiled, because he finally understood something. The most important legacy of justice isn't punishment, it's prevention. And somewhere beyond the city lights, beyond the courtrooms and headlines, the consequences of one terrible decision were still creating opportunities for redemption. Yet one final chapter remained unwritten, a chapter neither Nathaniel nor Tyler expected. A letter was already making its way through the federal prison mail system, and the sender's name would change everything. The letter arrived on a cold January morning. Snow drifted against the fences surrounding the federal correctional facility. Inside, Tyler Grant sat alone at a metal table during mail distribution. Most days brought nothing: bills he could no longer pay, legal notices, occasional advertisements. This envelope was different. The handwriting looked familiar. Tyler stared at it for several seconds before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The sender's name appeared at the bottom: Nathaniel Brooks. Tyler felt his chest tighten. He unfolded the letter. The message was short, direct, unexpected. "Mr. Grant, I have spent years thinking about the events that changed both our lives. Many people assume I hate you. They are mistaken. Hatred is a burden I chose not to carry. You attempted to destroy my future. Instead, you transformed it. The foundation now serves thousands of people who would otherwise stand alone. Children have parents at home because of it. Innocent people have regained their freedom because of it. Communities have gained protection because of it. You created suffering. Others created purpose from that suffering. That is the difference between power and responsibility. I am retiring this year. Before doing so, I wanted to tell you something important. The greatest punishment you received was never prison. It was being forced to witness what integrity accomplished where corruption failed. I hope one day you understand that. Sincerely, Nathaniel Brooks. Tyler read the letter 3 times, then a 4th, then a 5th. For a long time, he simply sat there. No anger, no excuses, no arguments, only silence. Years earlier, he would have dismissed every word. Now he could not. Because prison stripped away the distractions that once protected him from self-reflection. The uniform, the badge, the authority, the ego. All gone. Only the truth remained. For the first time, Tyler understood that Nathaniel had already won long before the verdict. The judge refused to become bitter, refused to become cynical, refused to let injustice define him. That realization hurt more than any sentence. Months later, Nathaniel Brooks officially retired from the federal bench. The ceremony filled a historic courtroom in downtown Chicago. Former colleagues traveled from across the country. Attorneys packed the gallery. Community leaders attended. Even people whose convictions had been overturned through the Justice Center appeared. When Nathaniel finally addressed the audience, he spoke without prepared remarks. "People often ask whether I believe the system works," he said. The room became quiet. "My answer is complicated. Systems are not moral. People are. Systems only reflect the courage or weakness of the individuals operating them." Several heads nodded. Justice survives because ordinary people choose integrity when dishonesty would be easier. It survives because someone speaks when silence would be safer. It survives because good people refuse to surrender their principles. He paused. Most importantly, justice survives because every generation decides whether to leave the world better than it found it. The applause lasted several minutes, not because of his title, not because of his reputation, because everyone present understood he had lived those words. Years passed. The Tyler Grant Justice Center continued expanding. Additional offices opened across Illinois, then Ohio, then Michigan. Thousands became tens of thousands. Lives changed. Families reunited. Communities strengthened. The mission endured. One summer evening, long after retirement, Nathaniel sat on the porch of his home with Denise. The sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon. Children played in a nearby park. A warm breeze moved through the trees. The city felt peaceful. Nathaniel reflected on everything that had happened. The traffic stop, the arrest, the humiliation, the lawsuit, the foundation, the countless lives touched afterward. Looking back, he realized something remarkable. The most important victory was never the settlement, never the headlines, never the prison sentence. The true victory was ensuring that future innocent people had someone standing beside them. That was the legacy. That was the purpose. And that was why the story mattered. Far away inside a prison cell, Tyler Grant sat quietly beside a small window. Gray streaks had appeared throughout his hair. Age arrived faster behind bars. He looked toward the fading light and thought about choices. One choice had ruined his life. Another man's choices had improved countless others. The contrast could not have been clearer. As darkness settled outside, 2 very different legacies continued moving in opposite directions. One built through arrogance, one built through integrity. Only one would inspire future generations. And in the end, that made all the difference. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video.